Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, everyone, for another session of our daily Quran reflections. And we have reached juz number 15. So we have reached the half point of the Quran, which also means we've reached the half point of Ramadan for most of us. So it's exciting as well, but it's sad as well that, Ramadan has gone past in a flash. What we need to realize is that time goes past very, very quickly, and we need to try and make sure every day, every hour, every minute becomes as valuable as we can make it, inshallah. So without taking any more time, I will inshallah pass it over to Ustadha Hafsa. So this is Ustadha Hafsa's second time that she's doing a juz for us, and it's juz number 15. So Ustadha Hafsa, over to you, inshallah. Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakallah khair, Ustadh, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone online. It's so nice to be back with you, and it's really nice to see that so many of you have joined us. Inshallah, let's get started. I'm just going to go straight into it. So today we're going to be talking about a juz 15, and as you can see in front of you, there's a nice overview again of the entire juz. This juz is split between two surahs. So we have got the entirety of Surah Al-Isra in this juz, and then we have most of Surah Al-Kahf in this juz also, but the ending of Surah Al-Kahf goes into the next juz, into juz 16. I'm going to focus mainly on Surah Al-Kahf today, just because I feel like there's so many stories that I wanted to talk about, and as you can see on here, there's three of the stories in the Quran, in the Surah Al-Kahf, are actually mentioned in this juz, and those are the ones I wanted to take you through because I absolutely love them, and I'm sure you guys will too. But as for the overview, Surah Al-Isra talks about the Bani Israel, it talks about the Quran, it talks about universal signs of God and believing in God. It's got elements of divine law. It talks about the Quran, it talks about polytheists. There's lots of, I guess you can say, reinforcing the belief of Allah, the oneness of Allah. And then again, the narration of Adam alayhi salam and Iblis is narrated again. And the story of Adam alayhi salam and Iblis, the creation of Adam alayhi salam, that is, that when Adam alayhi salam was created, Iblis rebelled and he refused to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked him to. This story is repeated multiple times throughout the Quran, and what's really interesting is that every time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates this story, it's said differently, and we learn something new about Adam alayhi salam and Iblis, or about the event. And so once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala narrates that story in this surah, and it is narrated again in a different way. And Allah, it brings in something new. And so, that's really interesting to see the way that is done multiple times throughout. And then Surah Al-Kahf, we go into Surah Al-Kahf, where there are three main stories that are mentioned. And I'm not going to say too much about that right now because we'll go into that just shortly. Before we do start on Surah Al-Kahf, I thought I'd just pick out a few verses, from Surah Al-Isra that I thought would be really nice to mention. I really like these verses, and there's a beautiful, beautiful dua that is also mentioned in here. So the verses are, your Lord has commanded that you worship none but him and that you be good to your parents. If either of them or both of them reach old age with you, do not say to them a word of disrespect, nor scold them, but say to them kind words. And lower to them the wing of humility out of mercy, and say, my Lord, have mercy on them as they raised me when I was a child. Your Lord knows best what is in your minds. If you are righteous, he is forgiving to the obedient. And give the relative his rights, and the poor and the wayfarer do not squander wastefully. So these set of verses are so beautiful, subhanAllah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us exactly how we should be treating our parents. And I wanted to just touch on this, just talk about this a little bit, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said so beautifully that when your parents reach old age, be really, really good to them. Don't treat them with disrespect. Say to them kind words. It's a very short commandment, but it's got so much meaning behind it. And I feel like there's so much that we can take from that, because sometimes we might forget how we have to treat our parents, or we might forget why we need to get to our parents. But I feel like it just teaches us that we need to remember, and specifically this dua. And I'm sure lots of you have got this memorized. I know that certainly for our students at that, it is in the dua book. And so lots of you will have learnt it, or will be learning it. but the dua goes, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا, oh my Lord, have mercy on them, i.e. your parents, my parents, كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا, as they raised me when I was a child. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that your parents were the ones that raised you when you were a little child. Your parents spent, you can speak to your mom or your dad and they'll tell you how many countless nights that they sacrificed for you, how many times they woke up in the middle of the night. There's lots of things that your parents do for you. And I'm not a parent myself, but I have a sister that's got 2 children now, subhanAllah. And I see her and I listen to her telling me what she does for her children, and I see it firsthand with my sister. And it's hard to imagine and it's hard to know, I suppose, what our parents have done for us, because we don't remember a lot of it. But we have to, when we look at maybe our friends, our sisters, our siblings, people around us that have children, maybe it's more, it's a bit easier for us to see the sacrifices that parents have to make. And I'm sure lots of us have seen that. And so it's for that reason that we look back and we reflect on all of those sacrifices and we understand all of those things. And because of that, Allah reminds us to be good to your parents because of that. And I've included that last sentence as well, because, the last sentence, and give the relative his right to the poor, the wayfarer, and do not squander wastefully, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in this set of commandments, and I think it's quite empowering that just after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to be good to our parents, and we all know how important that is. I'm sure you've heard this countless times, this can't be the first time that you've heard this, but Allah tells us immediately after He tells us to be good to our parents, to also be good to our relatives, to the poor people, the wayfarer. Allah tells us to be good to everyone around us. So again, Allah is reinforcing this belief that it is, really important just to be good to people, to be good to those around us. And I'm sure that's something that you've noticed throughout the previous 14 juz. That's a theme that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings up a lot. Just being good to others is almost just the crux of our religion. Right, I'm going to move on to Surah Al-Kahf now. And there are... Okay, so I'm just going to go in with a key benefit of Surah Al-Kahf. I'm sure lots of you have heard this again, but we know that the person who memorizes the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, they will be secure against the Dajjal. That is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you learn these first 10 verses, and in some narrations the last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, then you'll be secure, you'll be safe, and you'll be saved from the Dajjal, the Antichrist. So we know through the teachings of our Prophet ﷺ that the believers at the end of times, before the day of judgment, we will be tested with the Dajjal, the Antichrist, someone who will come and who will claim to be, who will make miraculous claims, and who will test us with lots of different things. And 4 of those things are things that are included in this surah, and there are stories after each of these things that I wanted to go into. So that is faith, money, power, and knowledge. These are 4 things that the Dajjal will test us against. Faith, money, power, and knowledge. And I want you to remember that, and you can say that these are the key themes almost of this surah. Not necessarily the entire juz, because obviously Surah Al-Isra has got its own themes, but definitely throughout this surah, these are the 4 themes that come up through different stories. And we're not going to go through, or I'll just show you what we do have. There's 3 stories that we're going to go through. And the 4th story about Dhul Qarnayn, that's got to do with a test of power, we won't be able to go through because unfortunately that falls into just 16. So you might hear that story tomorrow, you might not. But do feel free to go away and read verses 83 to 100 of Surah Al-Kahf yourselves to find out about the last story. So I'm going to start off with the first story, and that is the one of the sleepers of the cave. And this is where people have been tested by their faith. So there was a bunch of boys, a bunch of young boys, we don't know exactly how many, but there were some boys who believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they had been driven out of their hometown because of their faith. So the town that they lived in, they didn't accept that these people believed in Allah, and because of that, these guys had to be driven out of their hometown. And so they went to a cave, and they went to sleep in a cave because they had nowhere else to go. They sought refuge in this cave. And subhanAllah, before they knew it, Allah had put them to sleep for 300 years. And they woke up, and to them, they just felt as though, the way that you feel after you wake up from a sleep. They thought, yeah, maybe we've slept for a day, maybe a day and a half. I don't know. It's been some time, but they would never have imagined it had been 300 years. And so you know, they just got up, and, you know, as you do, you get up in the morning and you're hungry, you went to go get some food. That's exactly what they did. They went to the town, they went to the main city center, and they went to try and buy some food. And as they started paying for their food, obviously they pulled out some money, they pulled out some coins to pay for their food. And the shopkeeper was so confused. He was like, where did you get this money from? Because the money was so ancient, subhanAllah, because remember, they lived 300 years ago. You know, just imagine if you walked into a shop and you started pulling out some shillings, and the shopkeeper would look at you like, where did you get that from? And what makes you think you can pay with that? That's exactly what was happening to these guys. And so they were confused. They said, what do you mean? And the shopkeeper explained to them that, you know, these are really ancient. And subhanAllah, like that, they realized that Allah had you know, Allah years. And so this test of faith that they had, where Allah had tested them with their faith, had become something so beautiful for them and something so meaningful, because what ended up happening was that the shopkeeper was so surprised, and he went and told the king, and the king came down to meet them. He came down to the cave, and he met the boy and the rest of his friends that they were all asleep in the cave with. And the boys managed to tell the king about Allah, and they explained to them their faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that way they were able to give da'wah. So these boys had held on to their faith, and it was because of them holding on to their faith, despite all of these people trying to test them with their faith, and all of these people trying to bully them out of their hometown, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really saved them, and he took them somewhere that was better for them, somewhere where people would listen to them, somewhere where they could openly speak about Allah. So that just goes to show, I suppose, that always hold on to your faith. Your faith will be tested, and especially the times that we live in today, I suppose it can get quite difficult sometimes for us to hold on to our faith. But it's important that we do, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will save us and he will make it easy for us if we hold on to it firmly. I'm just going to go straight onto the second story. So that was the first story that's mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf, that I said had a big theme around faith. The second story is, I've just called it gardens because it's centralized around people with gardens. But this story is a story that shows a test of wealth. And again, that's something that the Dajjal will test us with, that the Dajjal will have lots and lots of wealth, and it will be used as a test. So this story goes that there was two men and that lived together. They were really good friends. Not lived together, but, you know, they lived in the same town or whatever it was, and they were really good friends. Now, one of these men had no children and he had no wealth. He was a poor man. But this other man that he was friends with, he was a really rich man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him lots of gardens. He had given him lots of beautiful children, beautiful gardens. And after he had accumulated all of that wealth, he started to feel really arrogant, and it started to get to his head. And I'm sure you might have seen this around you sometimes when people come to power, people get really rich, it changes them. They say that, you know, wealth changes people, money changes you. And that's because it can make you really, really arrogant. And so this is a reminder to us to never let money get to your head, because that's what had happened to this man. What had ended up happening was he was so arrogant, he ended up boasting to his friend who didn't have any money. And Allah ended up destroying all of his gardens. Allah sent down a thunderstorm and it destroyed all of his gardens, because the man had decided, you know, he had felt so arrogant. He thought that it would never disappear, and he thought that he deserved all of this. And again, there's a beautiful dua that is mentioned over here that his friend says to him. So when the rich man says to the poor man, when he goes to him and boasts about all of his gardens, the poor man, subhanAllah, even though he had nothing, he remembers Allah, and he tells him, he advises his friend that you should have said, MashaAllah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that, you know, that this is what Allah has willed, and there's no might and power except of Allah. So the poor man is trying to remind his rich friend to attribute anything that he's been given directly back to Allah. But unfortunately, it was too late. Allah had destroyed all of his wealth, and then he ended up regretting what he did, but there was nothing he could do about it. And so this story, again, is, you know, it's a reminder of how wealth can be used to test us. The way that this man was tested with his wealth, Allah will test us with our wealth. Allah will test us with our wealth. Maybe we've not been tested with our wealth yet. Maybe you've not been tested with money. But you will. Allah, Allah swears by it. Allah promises it in the Quran that we will all be tested by wealth, because we are all capable of becoming this man. We are all capable of becoming arrogant when we get money. When we have more money, we are all capable of forgetting people that need our money. And that's something natural. But it's important to remember that we are not in control of how much money we get. Our money does not define our religiosity. Our money does not define how good we are or how good of a relationship we have with Allah. Like this man, this poor man, even though he had nothing, he remembered Allah, and he says that this is what Allah has willed. And so, it's important to remember that whatever Allah has written for you, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that you will get in your rizq, you will get it before you die. Before the angel, so the angel of death is called Israfil. And before the angel of death, Israfil, before he comes to take someone's soul, he actually goes to visit Angel Mikael, who is in charge of making sure that everyone gets what they are apportioned, that everyone gets their rizq. And Israfil goes to Mikael and he says, has this person been given all of his rizq? And if Mikael says no, then he'll wait, and he'll wait for Mikael to make sure that this person has got all of his riches or got all of the money that he was supposed to get, and then he will take his soul. So, no matter what you do, just remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always give you the money that you were supposed to get. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always make sure that you get your rizq, whether you are arrogant about it or not. That rizq will come to you. But it's an important reminder for us to always be humble about anything that Allah has given us. If Allah has given you something, it's not for you to go and show off to your friends that don't have something. It's not for you to be boastful about it or be arrogant about it, or to think that you are better than anyone because of it. And lastly, I'm going to quickly go on to the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. Okay, I've got like 2 minutes to say the story. The entirety of the story is not actually in just 15, but I think I will just sum it up because it doesn't make sense to say half the story. So, Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Khidr, this story is the one around knowledge. So again, we said that the Dajjal tests us or will test us with wealth, money, power, and knowledge. And so this one is around knowledge. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam was once asked, who has got the most knowledge? And Musa alayhi salam, the prophet of the time, said, I have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made me a prophet. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to teach him a lesson almost in this point, that even though you are a prophet, there will always be someone who knows more than you. And that's a big example to us, that even if you think you are the smartest in your class, even if you got 100% on your class test, there is always someone out there who is smarter than you. There is always someone out there who knows more than you. And again, it's just a reminder for us to humble ourselves, because through that, we learn to be better and we learn to be able to learn from others. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Musa alayhi salam that actually there's someone out there who is more knowledgeable than you. And he told him to go and meet Khidr alayhi salam. And this man, Khidr, Prophet Musa alayhi salam went to meet him, and he told him that Allah had sent him. And he said to Khidr, I want to chill with you, I want to follow you around, and I want to know why you're the most knowledgeable. Like, what do you know that I don't? And Khidr said to him straight away, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, you won't be able to stick around with me. You just won't understand me. But Prophet Musa alayhi salam begged him. He said, Allah has sent me here. Allah has told me that you are more knowledgeable than me. So I need to know what you know. I need to know what you have that I don't. Prophet Musa alayhi salam just wanted to learn from him. And so Khidr said, fine, but only on one condition, so long as you don't ask me any questions. And so Musa alayhi salam said, yeah, that's fine, anything to be able to come around with you. And so Khidr alayhi salam said, fine. And so the two of them start going, they're going on a journey, and they come across a river, and they have to get in this boat. They take this boat, and as soon as they get in the boat, Khidr alayhi salam, he makes a hole in the boat. And Musa alayhi salam's like, what are you doing? We took this boat from someone. Like, this isn't our boat. How dare you make a boat? How dare you make a hole in someone else's boat? He was really shocked at why Khidr would just poke a hole. And remember, if you carve a hole out into a boat, what's going to happen? The boat's going to sink. There's going to be a bunch of water that comes into the boat, and you're just going to drown because the boat's going to get filled with water, right? So Musa alayhi salam's like, why would you do that? Why would you ruin someone's boat? And Khidr just kind of looks at him and says, didn't I tell you that you won't be able to be patient with me and that you're not allowed to ask any questions? Musa alayhi salam's like, sorry, like, I'm sorry I did that. I won't ask again. But Musa alayhi salam couldn't help himself. something else happened, and they were walking, and Khidr alayhi salam, he just killed the boy. He killed the boy. He killed a little boy, very small. He was a small innocent boy. They had just met him. They had just walked past him, and Khidr alayhi salam just killed him. Musa alayhi salam was horrified. He was like, "Why did you do that, man? Like that? He was a little kid. That was a really small kid that you just killed out of nowhere." And Khidr alayhi salam said the same thing to him again. He said, "Didn't I tell you that you can't be patient with me? You won't understand." Musa alayhi salam, again, he said, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I won't do it again. But again, Khidr alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, they started walking, and they got to a town, and they had asked people for some food, but the people were really mean to them. They said, no, we're not going to give you any food. And then they said, they went to a wall. There was a wall in that town that Khidr alayhi salam then started to rebuild. It was a broken wall, and Khidr alayhi salam started to fix it. And Prophet Musa alayhi salam, so confused at this point, he said, Khidr, I don't understand. These people were so horrible to us. Why are you fixing their wall? They refused to give us food when we asked them. Why are you why are you fixing their wall? You should have asked them to pay you for it or something like that. You should at least ask them to pay us in food or anything like that, right? And Khidr alayhi salam said that, I've had enough. I told you not to ask any questions, but you've asked like too many. This is it. I think we need to go our own ways. Because I told you can't be patient with me. But before we go off, Khidr alayhi salam said that I just want to tell you why I did the things I did. And so Khidr alayhi salam explained, and he said, as for the boat where they were headed, the river that they were headed on, at the other end of that river, there was a tyrant king. And when they were getting off, the tyrant king was looking at the boats. And if they were good boats, if they were in really good condition, he was just stealing them. He was stealing the boats. So he said, I made a hole in there so that the king wouldn't steal it. And this way we could just go and we could fix the boat, and whoever this boat belonged to, they could just keep it. And Musa alayhi salam was like, oh, that's really smart. But of course, Musa alayhi salam didn't know that before, but Khidr alayhi salam did. And again, with the child, Khidr alayhi salam explains that this child, he was going to grow up, and he was going to be really, really difficult for his parents. And his parents wouldn't have tolerated him, and it would have been really bad for him. He would have been really sinful if he grew up and he lived the life that he had planned for him. And so I killed him to save his parents the grief, to save him the grief. And, they're all happy now. As in, obviously, they will be sorrowful, they'll be mourning the loss of their child, I'm sure. But at least the child will be going to Jannah. And Musa alayhi salam was like, again, that makes sense. And then lastly, about the wall, Musa alayhi salam asked him again, why did you do that? And Musa alayhi salam explained. He said that wall, behind it, there was lots of treasure. There was lots of treasure that someone, this dad, had left behind for his children. And these parents had left behind for their children because that was for them to be inherited when they grow up. But if the wall had collapsed, the people in that town, remember how evil they were? Not evil, they weren't very nice, right? They didn't even give these guys food when they asked. They were such people that they would have stolen all of the treasures that were there, and the children would never have, been able to get it. So Khidr alayhi salam, he built the wall, he rebuilt it so that the people couldn't steal the stuff from there, and it would be saved for the children that actually it was saved for. And, at the end of that, Musa alayhi salam, he realized that he wasn't, in fact, the most knowledgeable, or that there was people around him that had more knowledge, maybe a different type of knowledge, but they had more knowledge than him. Just like that, Musa and Khidr alayhi salam, they went their own ways. But this story is nicely mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf, and it teaches us, like I was saying, that it's not just us that. It's not just Musa alayhi salam that was tested with knowledge, but we will all be tested with knowledge. Whether that's feeling arrogant when you get 100% in the test, or whether that's just feeling really good about yourself, feeling really ahead of yourself when you learn something, or when you think you know better than someone else. And with that, I'm going to conclude. Jazakallah khair to you all for listening.
Jazakallahu khairan, Ustadha Hafsa, for summarizing the juz for us, and especially juz number 15 with all those wonderful stories to learn from. Jazakallahu khairan for your time, and also just to remind everyone else as well that inshallah we will be back here tomorrow approximately the same time for juz number 16. So inshallah, try and be here on time as well. From us, that's it for now. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.